As wild as it might sound to some Knicks fans who have seen the brilliant things Brunson has done in the regular season, the even more brilliant things he's done in the postseason, I think this season has the potential to be his best season because I think they're going to incentivize him to make some of these reads that he's been missing the last couple seasons. And I think they're going to play faster, so you're going to kind of remove some of these lower floor shot attempts from his shot diet. I think he's just going to be really, really helped by this change in style that is at the forefront of what they were doing in the preseason.
The Knicks could not have asked for a better situation coming into this season and really in any NBA season. We're talking about arguably two of the top three players in the entire conference are out on two of the top four teams. And this is happening simultaneously to the Knicks having their strongest roster in decades, if not ever, with almost their entire core rotation entering their primes all at the same time. Do we understand how absurdly ideal that is? Like, we need to take a moment to consider how ideal this situation is for the New York Knicks. This is Hot Hand Theory. This is a podcast where we talk about the NBA and break things down from an analytical perspective. I'm your co-host XJ. As always, I'm joined by my brilliant co-host Geoff. And Geoff, we're back. I think we're back. I think we're here. I think it's been several months and we've really missed being on the air and talking basketball. And I'm so excited to be back. And we're going to be talking about the Knicks today in our unique Hot Hand Theory way. We have some super, super exciting updates on Hot Hand Theory, and really want to answer a lot of your questions from our amazing audience you guys have been awesome, just kind of like asking where we've been. And we really appreciate that. First thing I want to say, if you want to jump straight to our thoughts on the Knicks, on Mike Brown and the new roster and why, I think this season is the Knicks' best chance to win a title in over 50 years. If you're watching on YouTube, you can just hit the timestamp and it'll go to the beginning of Knicks talk. I'll also include a pinned comment. So I wanted to say that because first we have to give a little introduction. Obviously, like I mentioned, we've been away for a while. I want to apologize for the long layoff. It was not intentional or planned or anything like that. I actually ended up personally dealing with some pretty significant health issues. So I don't know if you can tell. You probably can't because you only see us from the chest up, if that, maybe just our faces. But I've lost around 45 pounds since the last time we did an episode of Hot Hand Theory. And, just for a few months, I literally was not able to eat. When I say literally, I mean like literally, not like, I literally wasn't able to, like literally not able to eat. So, but I would say I'm doing better. I'm stable now. I'm just still recovering, but yeah, we weren't going to miss coming back for this season. And we deeply appreciate everyone who's reached out and asked where we were and, if we're shutting down the pod. We're not shutting down the pod. And in fact, this is going to be our busiest, biggest, best season ever yet of Hot Hand Theory. And I'd love for you to talk about it because I've been talking way too much. Geoff, how are you doing, man? Like that's, people have been asking where we are, but mostly what they want to know is how is Geoff doing? So why don't you want to tell our audience how you're doing and what we have lined up for this season that's so exciting?
Yeah, people are always interested in how I'm doing. I'm doing great. A little peek behind the curtain here. Oh, you may or may not know this. I would say since XJ and I first started planning Hot Hand Theory, which was summer of 2023 now, which is crazy that it's been over 2 years. Those first two seasons, I mean, you and I talk every day, probably like every single day we're having a basketball conversation of some sort. And so, I just want to say for our audience and for me too, I mean, we're just so glad you're doing better because having to go a couple months, with going from talking every day to, every week and just checking in on you, not having those basketball conversations. I know I missed it, so I'm sure our audience missed it even more. I'm glad you're doing well.
Thank you.
And
I appreciate it.
Yeah, not only are we back with this podcast and not only were you dealing with, your individual stuff, but one thing the audience should know is that we've spent this whole offseason building a website, and that's going to launch. This episode comes out Tuesday, so tomorrow, technically on Wednesday, and this website is going to be, it's just going to be a game changer for Hot Hand Theory entirely, because you're going to have easier access to our entire archive of episodes. We are going to have written content weekly. We have merch. We have, which we're kind of soft launching, but most importantly, this is going to create a, don't want to get too into the details here, but we're basically looking to expand our community and become even more interactive with anybody who wants to join. So the goal, and we hope this is very, very quick, is that anybody who wants to be a part of our community will have more direct access with us and more regular direct access with us. Thinking YouTube communities, but however we, choose, whatever path we choose to go, that's always the ultimate goal for what we're going for, because, XJ said it all the time. We don't want people to just come here and just feel like they're being talked at and then we disappear. And like, we think we have an interesting perspective, and that's how this whole thing started. But we're just as interested in, other people's perspectives, learning from you guys. And we hope that, we've built up enough trust with people who are listening that they'll want to, just have more regular access to us, discuss basketball, and keep trying to understand and dive deep into some of the game's most difficult and interesting questions. So, yeah, I mean, it's just going to be hothandtheory.com. We that's one of the things we joke about all the time. How we got this moniker for everything across all the platforms is ridiculous, but
sick IP for real.
I don't know how we did it, but we did it. And yeah, this is going to be an incredibly busy season for us, because we're going to be writing, we're going to be doing film work on the site, we're going to be doing more video work. It's not just going to be a weekly pod. We're going to have video essays, we're going to have commentary videos. This video is going to be nuts. And for two people like us who just love the NBA and love really, really researching it and trying to better our understanding, we just couldn't be more excited.
Yeah, that was a great introduction for our audience, and I echo everything Geoff said. Like Geoff said, we are hard launching tomorrow, but it's soft launch right now. You can just go to Hot Hand Theory right now and check it out. Just check out the site and kind of give you a sense of what we're going to be having coming. So definitely agree with everything Geoff said. And let's get to some Knicks talk. We can get out of kind of the self-indulgent navel glazing that we've been doing and glazing at the same time. Let's just talk about the Knicks, because there's so much to talk about.
Navel glazing?
Glazing is such a good, it was like a good mistake. Like, it's like a new term that makes sense. It's like a Gen Z navel gazing. You're navel glazing each other. That's what we were doing. But I won't say we're going to glaze the Knicks, because, we tell it how it is, and we tell it how we believe it to be based on the evidence in front of us. And people don't know. I mean, I started as co-host of the Locked On Knicks podcast, where I appear there about 2 times a week is going to be kind of my cadence there. So I've talked about the Knicks a few times already this season, but we don't know. Geoff, your opinions are not publicly available. And I want to say, at least for me, I've been waiting to hear your first thoughts on this new squad, this new coach, this roster, the preseason, and what it all means for the Knicks 2026 season. So where do you want to start? Where do you want to take us? This is my favorite part. Where do you want to take us, Geoff, to start the show talking about the Knicks?
Well, I think we have to start. I mean, we'll get into the more general, what do we think this team can do? Because I don't know about you, but I think that stuff is not boring, but just the Knicks are 4th in title odds on betting sites. Their over-unders this year is like 54.5, I think, something like that. Of course they can win a championship. I think it would be bad analysis to just be like, oh, they can't win a championship this year. Like that's just, and I'm not saying that because I've heard that from anybody. So if anybody has said that, please don't think I'm taking a shot at them. But yeah, I just think a team that's, top 5 in title odds, and especially in a conference where, you got Halliburton, he's injured, Tatum, he's injured at least for a little bit. That's 2 of the Knicks' biggest rivals who are just kind of kneecapped from the start. The East is a little weaker than the West. Like, of course, the Knicks can get to the end. So I think it's kind of more important to start with by zooming in on the micro. The biggest change they made this offseason is they went from Tom Thibodeau to Mike Brown. And I'd love to dive into what I think some of the differences you might see are and how that could benefit or hurt the Knicks. And yeah, I think anybody who listens to this, some people might say that we were Tom Thibodeau haters. I wouldn't describe us that. Like XJ just said, I think we were more realists. But we were, like it or not, we were at the forefront of Tom Thibodeau's not doing the best possible job for this group of players. Here are some changes he can make. Maybe they'd be better going in a different direction to get a coach who can hone in on the things this roster really needs. And I think the early returns from preseason and based on everything Mike Brown has said are that they might be able to get those things, at least from a tactical standpoint. I'm going to swing it back to you, XJ, because I'm not super convinced from a rotational standpoint that it's going to look much different. But I thought in the preseason we saw some improvements tactically that should benefit this group of players. Would you agree with that?
I mean, I definitely agree with that for sure. I've been very excited about what I've seen from a tactical standpoint, and also really just like there's a middle ground between strategy and tactics, sort of like the implementation of strategy that doesn't relate to concrete. It's more like conceptual, and like the way that the Knicks have approached the game, I feel like really, really excited about that. I could go on into details, but I wonder if you want to go somewhere else first, you can do that.
Yeah, so, I mean, the thing I really saw in preseason that I liked is that the Knicks right off the bat are playing faster. And I want to reiterate a point that XJ and I have talked about with other teams, but if you're a Knicks fan, maybe you haven't listened to those episodes. There's a common misconception about pace, and it's that pace is transition. Like when people think of fast teams, they think of the Showtime Lakers, they think of the Heatles, they think of these teams that are, getting out in transition and scoring points that way off of turnovers. But that's not necessarily true, or it's not always true. And an example that I would give, and that actually I know would give because I've heard him give it, is the Indiana Pacers. The Indiana Pacers that you've known since Rick Carlisle was the coach and they traded for Tyrese Halliburton. They don't get out in transition all that much. At least that's not the main driver of their fast pace. They are a really, really fast team, but they do it in the half court. And I saw a team in the Knicks this preseason that actually looked a little bit closer to the Pacers than they've ever looked before. And if you look at some of the data, last season, the Knicks shot 22% of their field goals in the last 7 seconds of the shot clock. And then they shot only 30% of their field goals in the first 8 seconds of the shot clock. So you have, a fifth of your shots coming at the end when the defense is set. You're not going to get the best possible look. And then you have less than a third of your shots coming in the first 8 when the defense isn't set. And you probably have a better chance of getting a great look. Compare this to the 2023 Kings. 16% of their field goal attempts came in the last 7 seconds of the shot clock. And then 40% of their shots came in the first 8. That's a huge difference from an efficiency standpoint, from an efficiency ceiling standpoint. And so when you bring up pace with these Knicks, there are a lot of people who will talk about, correctly, mind you, that Jalen Brunson's methodical, that they don't really have anybody besides Josh Hart who likes to grab the ball and just go. They kind of lost that when they traded Emmanuel Quickley, who was their biggest driver of pace before the OG Anunoby trade. But there are ways for the Knicks to play fast that don't require them creating live ball turnovers or pushing off of misses in a way that's antithetical to who these guys are as players. There's a way for them to play faster in the half court that not only can they get better looks in that early in the shot clock, but also if they start their offense sooner and the first look doesn't go as planned, it leaves them more time to go into the second look and the third look. And then all of a sudden you get these Jalen Brunson isolations, which the Knicks were just defaulting to the last couple seasons. Now all of a sudden that can be plan B, that can be plan C. And I think you'll see a more effective overall offense.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't missed a step, folks, because this is the same point I also wanted to talk about, and I agree with everything you said, and I'd really honestly take it slightly a step further. So, like you talked about pace and some of the misconceptions around pace with it being about transition, but I think people are talking a lot about, or at least I've seen some stuff about the Knicks pace in the preseason so far being down. And I think that generally, if you just look at the data, the statistic of pace, it is something that they want to improve. Like they will want to improve that in of itself. But more important than that raw pace stat, more important than transition, like you mentioned about the Indiana Pacers, is there's something else that's happening, and that speaks to being in a fast offense, an offense that moves quickly, that has pace. You can have pace in half court, all of those things you were describing it. But also, I also think there's something different than just kind of getting a shot up with X number of seconds left in the shot clock, which I think has some value too, because generally you're getting better looks if you're shooting it earlier in the shot clock. Otherwise, you wouldn't shoot the shot. You'd wait a little bit more time and then get a better shot. But all of this is trying to kind of get at something, like if you combine all of those things that we're discussing, it's trying to get at something that I've started calling probes. So basically, to me, when you think about it, what confers value is creating potential high quality shot attempts. That's really what matters more than anything else. And the way you create high quality shot attempts, you mentioned the Pacers. Obviously, the Pacers are a great example, not just because of like how people think of them as a transition team and they don't necessarily run as much as people thought, but the Pacers were only 7th in pace last season during the NBA regular season. And that was only one single possession per game ahead of the 15th place team, who was the New Orleans Pelicans. One single possession from being dead middle of the road. And raw pace obviously conveys very limited information, but probes, which I'll explain what they are, they're difficult to mention because there's some subjectivity to it. But to me, I define it, like I have a very specific definition, which is any meaningful offensive attempt to create a scoring chance, whether it ends in an actual shot attempt or just a reset of the offense. So the more times you probe the defense and try to generate shots within a single possession, the more likely you are to find a high quality shot. Now that shot may come with 10 seconds left on the clock, 15 seconds left on the clock, 5 seconds left on the clock. Who knows? But think about 2 possessions. So you could have 2 possessions. One ends with a shot attempt with 5 seconds on the clock. But if it started with 21 seconds and there were 3 probes, 3 attempts to create high quality looks, and one possession started with 11 seconds on the clock and ended with a shot attempt with 5 seconds left on the clock, same kind of situation in terms of the timing of the shot, but only one attempt was made to get a high quality look. In a lot of cases, we're talking about Jalen Brunson dribbling the ball up the court, lowering the clock, running a high pick and roll. If that doesn't work, going in his isolation bag and looking to score. That happens so often. But whether you have 3 probes versus 1, the situations where you have 3 probes are so much more likely to be higher quality possessions, even though the pace is technically the same. This is one possession, the same amount of time. But the pace, although that's likely to be the same, the quality of the possession is dramatically different. So to me, this is a key for Knicks fans to look out for. Yes, you can monitor pace stats, you can monitor transition, you can monitor, when the shots come with how many seconds left on the clock. Those are all nice things to monitor. But what you really want to watch for from a film standpoint, from a watching the game standpoint, is how soon are they starting possessions and how many times are they looking to create a high quality shot within the same possession, even if nothing manifests. If they're attempting to create high quality possession shot attempts 3 times within a possession, that is going to lead to the best, most effective, most sustainable possible offense. If we see the Knicks get better at that as the season progresses, that is huge, huge, huge for their potential success in the postseason, as we saw with the Indiana Pacers, who were excellent in the postseason, better than a lot of people thought, including myself. And to me, this is a large reason why. And I think the Knicks are going to be able to have that this season with Mike Brown, because this seems to be an area of emphasis.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you mentioned not only the probing aspect of it, but they used the specific example of Brunson versus Halliburton, because I think even the least objective of Knicks fans in this case, who, you can't even compare Brunson to Halliburton, like if that's their mindset, I think even they would acknowledge that this is an area probably where the difference between the two players is the widest. If you imagine, just close your eyes and imagine a Jalen Brunson possession versus imagining a Tyrese Halliburton half court possession, you can imagine Halliburton manipulating the pick and roll, getting 2 feet into the paint, and just not liking what the result is, and then just trying again. Like, Halliburton is arguably the best prober in the entire NBA. And that's why the Pacers' offenses are always so good, irrespective of who he plays with, because whoever is on the court with him, they're playing fast in the half court, and they're getting multiple opportunities per half court possession to just try and figure out what's going to be the best possession. It's so rare and so infrequent for the Knicks to do that. Like, especially these last.
To add to that real quick, Geoff, you mentioned how Halliburton is probably the best prober, which I agree. You know who's also like a ridiculously good prober? TJ McConnell.
Yeah.
Another guy on the same team, dude. He's so good at it. Like, he'll get into the teeth of the defense, look for a shot, Nash dribble out and make a nice pass, and they'll reset this. Like, it all happens within like 3 seconds. So it's kind of amazing that they were both on the same team. But I just wanted to add
it's a great call. And it really does make you wonder too. I mean, Halliburton was a good player in Sacramento, but it makes you wonder how much of it is deployment. How much of these guys being coached to play a certain way? How much are they being incentivized to? I mean, we talked about it last season with Brunson Towns on the pick and rolls, the pick and pops. And I think that one of Brunson's biggest shortcomings last season was not anticipating the times that Towns was going to pop open and passing him open. But how is he not capable of making those passes, of anticipating those reads, or is he not coached to do so? I think we're going to get a pretty solid A/B test here and see if it's deployment or if it's individual shortcomings by the player, or is it a little bit of both? I mean, I think we're going to at least. I won't say we'll get concrete answers because we're not in the arena, in the practices, seeing how they're being coached. But I think we can come closer to coming up with a hypothesis. And I mean, if you just zoom in on Brunson, these last 3 seasons as a Knick, you're seeing 96th percentile, 98th percentile, 99th percentile offensive EPM. He's been an amazing offensive player for these Knicks, but has he been fully maxed out? And I think, if you look at counting stats, you look at, how many points is he averaging, which some people you might say yes. But I think if you look at offensive impact on his team, I would strongly argue that no, he has not been maxed out. And you really, really have to dive into how he's getting his offense, how he's conferring his impact to see why that's the case. He's a high volume scorer whose efficiency is solid, but it's kind of been hurt by the shots he takes and when he takes those shots. He's just around league average in effective field goal percentage, which, okay, like you can point to the insane volume that he has, but Brunson's such a good shooter. He should be better than that from the floor. If you look at his splits, he's in the top of the league in mid-range volume, but he's just in between the 50th and the 75th percentile these last couple of years in three-point volume. That's no good. He's below the 5th percentile in almost every single assisted on category. If you just look at assisted on rim attempts, assisted on mid-range, assisted on threes, assisted on total, he's never being assisted on ever. He's forced to self-create everything. And then you look at what types of shots he's shooting. Last season, 10% of his shots were shot off the catch, XJ. Just 10%. Compare that to someone like Donovan Mitchell, who is, probably in terms of who Brunson is compared to more than anyone, I would say it's Donovan Mitchell. Last season with Kenny Atkinson coaching their team, Donovan Mitchell shot 20% of his shots off the catch, double Jalen Brunson. Almost a quarter of Brunson's shots came in the last 6 seconds of the shot clock. These are all things that add up and they really, really are going to hurt how Brunson's impact is perceived by some of these top-down metrics. And if you look at just the simple team on-off stuff, it actually kind of makes a lot of sense that the Knicks played one way when Brunson was on the court and they were good, but then they had a pretty large sample size of playing a different way when Brunson wasn't on the court because they couldn't play that way because only Jalen Brunson could even tread water playing the way that Thibs wanted him to do. So they had no other choice but to lean into other aspects of offense, like moving the ball, like moving off the ball. And I think, as wild as it might sound to some Knicks fans who have seen the brilliant things Brunson has done in the regular season, the even more brilliant things he's done in the postseason, I think this season has the potential to be his best season of his Knicks career and of his career, because I think they're going to move him up the ball more. I think they're going to incentivize him to make some of these reads that he's been missing the last couple seasons. And I think they're going to play faster. So you're going to kind of remove some of these lower floor shot attempts from his shot diet. I think that he's going to maintain or maybe slightly reduce his volume, but I think you're going to see his efficiency increase. And I think he's just going to be really, really helped by this change in style that is at the forefront of what they were doing in the preseason.
I love this because I agree with you in some ways and I disagree with you in a couple ways. So I agree. I think Brunson's utilization obviously is going to change pretty significantly. I don't think it'll be from a metrics standpoint the most impactful, especially offensive season of his career. And the reason I believe that is because I think Brunson's going to be in a position where he's doing a lot of stuff that aren't like the things that he does best, which makes it really, really difficult for you to max out your offensive impact. When players max out their offensive impact, generally they're being deployed in such a way where whatever they're doing, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100% of the time, whatever they're doing primarily is the thing that they do better than anyone else, like on a relative scale. And Brunson, I think, is very effective off the ball. He's not one of the best off the ball players in the entire league. His off ball gravity is not one of the highest of the entire league. It is on the ball. When Jalen Brunson is on the ball as an on the ball player, Jalen Brunson is one of the best in the entire league, if not arguably the best. And he won't be in that position. So for that reason, I think it'll be difficult for his offensive impact to be approaching like what it was in sort of like the best offensive impact season of his career, which was 2024. I think it might be better than last season because he just kind of played not as well at certain points. I don't think he played to his best capacity. So I think we'll see something in the middle of that. But regardless of that just like tangible metric, when we look at EPM, when we look at LeBron, regardless of that, I think that it'll be the best season of his career with respect to team success and with respect to where they require his particular talents. Again, that comes into late game situations, end of clock situations, playoff situations, all of these different scenarios. And I also think that his deployment is just going to be better for him in terms of his durability, sustainability for the team. And I also think that we'll see the offensive impacts of a lot of guys who are on the team go way up. So I think Mikal Bridges is going to be probably, in my opinion, have the best offensive impact of his career. I think OG Anunoby might have the best offensive impact of his career. And Karl-Anthony Towns won't because he's going to be playing too much for that to be possible. But when he's at the 5, I think we'll see some of the most effective Karl-Anthony Towns play of his career. And that'll be in large part because of the way that Brunson's changing his game. So the sum is going to be greater than the whole is going to be greater than the sum of its parts with this team, in large part because of Jalen Brunson changing some of his stylistic approach. And while, again, I don't think his personal offensive impact is going to be the greatest, because he's going to be doing some things that, like, yeah, if we had another guy off the ball running around and kind of pulling guys away from the rim gravitationally, there's plenty of guys who can do that better than Jalen Brunson. So therefore, his relative impact goes down in that way. But I just think it'll be better for the team because they have so many other guys who have skill sets that have nowhere near been maximized. And if you maximize those guys, if you take 5% off of Jalen Brunson and maximize those other guys by 5% each, now you have a much better team that's more sustainable, and you still have the Brunson stuff when you need it. The question for me, Geoff, really is like, is there a difference? And this is like very qualitative, but is there a difference in terms of Brunson not getting a rhythm by taking 20 shots between the first and third quarter? And when he gets to the fourth quarter, is he not in the same rhythm? Is he a little bit off? Is he not able to kind of come through in those situations that we've known him to come through in? And while I don't believe necessarily in this, like, clutch time God kind of thing, I do believe in the kinds of shots that he wants and the kinds of shots that he excels at are very valuable in those situations. And is he able to make them with the same frequency and rate when he doesn't have the same rhythm? If his field goal attempts come down, if its touches come down, which I imagine they will, if its seconds per touch come down, which I imagine they will, that's something I'm curious about. But overall, I generally agree with you, and I think it'll be much better for the team the way that Jalen Brunson is asked to play this season.
Yeah, I think that someone like Jalen Brunson, even if there is a difference, the differences will be minuscule enough to the point where I don't think it will affect his rhythm. I'm open to being wrong about that, but I don't think he's going to become, Steph Curry roaming around the perimeter. But I do think that even just relatively, even like if on the whole, the changes are small, or in a vacuum, the changes are small, relatively, they might make, to your point and the point you just made, they might relatively just make a huge difference on the team offense. You also brought up the whole Towns playing the 4 thing, which I think is a nice transition into what the Knicks starting lineup is going to be. And just sort of, because we were at the forefront of the rotation talk last season. And
rotation talk, this is what the people have been waiting for. Lineup talk, Geoff. Let's do it.
Yeah, this is what they wanted. They wanted another soundbite about how Deuce not starting means that he's not gonna play with the starters at all. I do think it's interesting because Mitch changes the equation a little bit. I mean, we talked about this a lot last season. Mitch with Towns, OG, Bridges, and Brunson is a huge favorite to be better than Hart was, because you're similarly you're not fully leaning into Towns as a stretch center and going 5 out and benefiting from on offense what you can get from maximizing your spacing, but you're getting a way better trade-off in the other departments. You have Mitch's rim protection. He's a better rebounder. He just does. I'm not saying there's nothing that Hart does better than Mitch. Of course, there are things that Hart does better than Mitch, but on the whole, Mitch is going to help those 4 other guys more than Hart did. I'm still not sure it's the team's highest ceiling lineup, though. Do you still agree with that, or do you think that it's just Mitch starting is an easy decision?
So those are 2 different questions to me. One, no, it's clearly, to me, in my opinion, not the team's highest ceiling lineup at all, for sure. I feel very strongly about that. That doesn't mean that it shouldn't be the starting lineup. So I'm more open to the idea that while it's not their highest ceiling lineup and probably won't be their best lineup, I think people know what I and probably you think their best lineup's going to be, is the same one that we talked about last season, which is the 4 primary starters and Deuce McBride. I still think there's still an argument for Mitch starting being the best way that the Knicks can start the game. So to answer your question, your short question with a long answer.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think as long as they rotate in a way where you see Deuce with the starters more than they did last season, which for those who don't know, I mean, Deuce played 40 minutes with the starters last season. Just an embarrassing number, just absolutely embarrassing.
It didn't
Especially
qualify.
given,
It didn't qualify on cleaning the glass because it didn't get over 100 possessions.
yeah, I mean, just truthfully, it's an embarrassing indictment on how on the rotations last season. It was just, yeah, I don't have any way to soften the blow. That was just, it was embarrassing. But I think Mitch starting makes it easier to substitute in a way where you could see Deuce with those guys more. And I think that you see a lot of pushback because of the size. And I kind of want to address that for a moment. So we heard a lot of the same conversations before the OG Anunoby trade with Quickly and Brunson. Because a lot of people were like, correctly, Quickly is one of their best players. He should just start. And other people would say, well, it's too small. You can't put Quickly with Brunson. Number one, across 1.5 seasons, Quickly and Brunson played 1,240 minutes together, and they outscored opponents by over 9 points per 100 possessions. Okay, so I mean, already your argument is kind of flimsy there because they just crushed whoever they played. But number two, it actually was more reasonable, even though Quickly's better than Deuce McBride is. It's actually a more reasonable criticism of the Quickly Brunson backcourt than the Deuce Brunson backcourt, because Quickly's optimal role as a defender is as an off-ball roamer. Anybody who's a Knicks fan, anybody who dove into the tape, especially in that 2023 season, understands just how good Quickly was defensively when he got to play off the ball. When he played that weak side low man in Thibodeau's defensive scheme, we're back. When he played that weak side low man in Thibodeau's defensive scheme, he was legitimately in the top percentile of most impactful defenders in the NBA. Like, he was incredible in that role. It was almost like they were playing 6-on-5 versus other teams because he was everywhere. But the problem with that is when Jalen Brunson's on the court, if you have one guard who can't guard at the point of attack because he's not very good, and then you have another guard who you don't want at the point of attack because his ideal role is off the ball, you're pretty handcuffed in terms of what the other 3 guys can do, who they can be. You don't have that problem with Deuce McBride. Deuce McBride's number one skill defensively is at the point of attack. He's a good screen navigator, but he's just very, very tough at the point of attack. You can even put him on some bigger, wings, but your flexibility increases with the Deuce Brunson backcourt relative to the Brunson Quickly backcourt, and that shows up in the numbers. Brunson and Deuce, when they play together these last 2 seasons, are out. The Knicks are outscoring opponents by 15 points per 100 possessions. This is a totally viable backcourt pairing. I know Deuce doesn't do as much with the ball in his hands as you'd like, but like XJ just said, if Brunson's going to have the ball a lot anyways, then your guard has to be someone who's going to grab his defender, make sure his defender doesn't want to leave him. And that's one of Deuce's greatest skills offensively. That is his greatest skill offensively. He's an amazing shooter off the catch. He's an amazing spacer, a high value spacer off the ball. That's exactly who you could not dream. I know he's only 6'1", maybe, but you could not in a lab create like a more ideal profile for a basketball player to play next to Jalen Brunson than an elite point of attack defender who is also an elite spacer. That is what you want next to Jalen Brunson. So just because he's a little undersized, we need to dispel that notion.
Yeah, and obviously I totally agree with this. I think it's a great point about Deuce's point of attack defense skill set versus Quickly's, and how Quickly is kind of not really optimally deployed next to Jalen Brunson, but the fact that Quickly and Brunson were so good over a ridiculous number of possessions, to me, that just goes to show how good Emmanuel Quickly is. Like, the guy is so good. It's just like, well, yeah, this is not ideal, but like, he's just so good that it just works. Like, we'll figure it out. But Deuce McBride that is not the case. And Deuce McBride, I think, I wouldn't necessarily call him an elite point of attack defender, because I think he can struggle in like isolation in some situations, but he's obviously an elite screen navigator. And so when you have an offense where, you know, most offenses aren't going to just like come down and ISO every time. They're going to try to run screens and create better mismatch advantages and open up their lead guard. And when you have a guy like Deuce McBride in that situation, that is the most ideal place you can be. So you can think of it as like, oh, you know, there are better isolation one-on-one defenders than Deuce McBride, and who have more size and height and can contest and keep guys in front of them, maybe potentially a little bit better in certain situations, depending on the type of skill set the offensive player has. And that's true, but can they do that and also get over every single screen that's thrown at them and be able to chase and contest from the side? And maybe Derek White. Who else can do that? Like Deuce McBride. There aren't many guys. And so, like, to your point, when you want a guy who's going to hound and harass the guy with the ball, to be able to have Jalen Brunson play somewhere else and sort of hide him on those wings and in the corners, there's no one better to have almost than, you know, again, like aside from Derek White, than a Deuce McBride. And so, yeah, I obviously don't buy the idea that, you know, for the size issue, it doesn't work or anything like that. I think at this point, we can be very, very confident that it works. The closest kind of resemblance of that lineup that you mentioned with Brunson is that they actually played with Deuce in the starters. It was Deuce in the starters, and then instead of Brunson, it was Campaign. I don't remember the exact data on that, but I know it was like ridiculously good in like whatever minimal amount of possessions it played, and that's what Campaign. So I think we can be very, very confident for all of these reasons that this lineup would be great. And in my opinion, I think this would be one of the best lineups in the league if it plays enough. I think if it plays 200, 300 possessions, whatever that possession threshold might be, if it does get to 300, I think it'll be in the 95th, at least 90th percentile of lineups over 300 possessions if it makes it there. And I think it is just genuinely their most synergistic, consistent, high ceiling lineup that they have. And so, I generally agree. Also, I wanted to say shout out to you, Geoff, Geoff has written a piece on synergistic lineups that will be live very soon. And like I said, I think this is the Knicks' most synergistic. We'll see what Geoff thinks if you check out his piece. And guess what? It's going to be on hothandtheory.com, and it's going to be on the most synergistic lineup on every team. So a plug to check that out when you get a chance. But yeah, so generally, I definitely agree with you, Geoff, and I think that lineup needs to play a bunch. And I hope, I'm cautiously optimistic that it will. The biggest thing my concern was about Mike Brown was, and people might think this is small, was his treatment of Keon Ellis, which I think Keon Ellis is an extremely, extremely valuable and impactful player in a way of Deuce McBride is. And I honestly like Keon a little better than Deuce McBride. And I think he got marginalized in Sacramento. That continues to be the case as they bring in Russell Westbrook,
which is like, happening.
It's like really sad. But
actually, the Knicks treat Deuce McBride about 1,000 times better than the Kings, who are like a way worse team than the Knicks treat Keon Ellis. It doesn't make any sense at all.
It makes no sense, but Mike Brown was a part of that problem. Mike Brown was a part of that issue, coaching the Kings, and so that was my biggest concern. It's like, is he going to end up in a situation, or is this a thing where it was just about Keon and something specifically with that situation, or is it about how he sees players like this in this ilk who have this sort of intangible impact, things that don't include, guys like that have very clear, direct offensive or defensive skill sets that are in your face. And we'll just have to see. But I'm hopeful that that was more about something with Keon specifically, and that we won't see that treatment of Deuce McBride on the Knicks.
Yeah, and the point you made about what Deuce at the point of attack does for his teammates on the court, it's such a big part of it, and our understanding of this is so primitive relative to what it's going to be down the line. But if you can, if you're listening to this, if you can just imagine what some of his teammates' biggest weaknesses are defensively, whether that's Jalen Brunson, think about how much we talked about Towns isn't a center because he doesn't protect the rim. Well, guess what? The opponent's ability to get to the rim is less, it's more difficult if the guy at the point of attack is more preventative. So, yeah, Towns could be better at the rim, but also they could just have a guy at the point of attack who makes it less likely that the ball handler gets to the rim. And so these things are symbiotic in nature and how they affect one another. Like Mikal Bridges, his worst trait as a defender is his screen navigation. And the Knicks spent all of last season, a huge percentage of last season with these starting lineups, having Mikal Bridges be the guy funneling the ball handler into the paint, basically. That was how opponents started their possessions. And so, of course, when your defensive scheme asks for the off-ball guys to stunt and recover, of course, when it's hugely reliant on elite rim protection, all of a sudden, guys like Brunson, guys like Towns, their flaws are more exposed because of the start of the action. And this is reflected in the metrics. Brunson had his worst defensive season by far last season. He was one of the most detrimental defenders in the NBA per the metrics last season. But that can be at least somewhat mitigated. And it starts with who is guarding the guy with the ball in his hands. And they have a defender on their team who can make it more difficult on that ball handler.
Yeah, playing into your players' particular weaknesses is probably not ideal. So if you're like, oh, we have this guy named Karl-Anthony Towns, he's pretty good at certain things defensively, but he's not a good rim protector. Let's make him have to protect the rim more frequently by putting guys who are getting beat around screens and allowing offensive ball handlers to get to the rim more frequently. Like that's probably not going to work out for the best for you.
And they did it to Josh Hart on the other end too, which is ironic because I would bet that most people who followed the Knicks would be like, well, if there's one player Thibs was going to get the most out of, it's a Josh Hart. Well, actually, Josh Hart spent a ton of time with this starting lineup and single-handedly prevented Karl-Anthony Towns from being his best offensive self at center. Like it took opponents 2 months to figure out all we got to do is hide our center on Josh Hart and then switch everything. And you know what the Knicks did? They didn't make a lineup change. They just said, well, I guess we can't go to that anymore. And they just stopped running Brunson Towns pick and rolls. Think about how nuts that, like imagine going back to last October before the season started. And I told you 2 months into the season, Brunson and Towns won't be running pick and rolls anymore. You would have been totally shocked. You would have been like, what are you talking about? Of course, these are two of the best offensive players in the league. This should be easy. But opponents took that away, and the coaching staff decided that this lineup was too good. They couldn't try anything else. You can't do that. You can't play into your players' weaknesses. Mike Brown has to do a better job of that than the previous coaching staff did.
Yeah, it's just coaching malpractice. Like it just is. And it's a perfect loop back to kind of something you said earlier. And I did want to loop back to that and address back at the very, very top of the show when you first were kind of like deciding what direction we were going to go. And you mentioned how the Knicks can, of course the Knicks can win a title this season. They're top 5 in title odds, and we kind of moved past that a little bit. And I know where you're coming from. Like you care about the details. We both care about the details. We care about all of the macro and the micro of like, what does it actually look like? How is deployment? Like what strategically and tactically is going to get you to that end goal that we're talking about? Obviously, that's why you and I do a podcast together. That's why we see eye to eye on so much of things. But I do think it's important, and not just from a Knicks fan standpoint, But from an NBA-wide standpoint, to look at the Knicks' title chances and contextualize that and actually take a moment to like sink in on what we're talking about. The Knicks, and again, you talked about this. The Knicks could not have asked for a better situation coming into this season and really in any NBA season. Like, and to be honest, if Thibs was still the coach, for me, this episode would probably have at least been like a little bit more pessimistic tone. Like I'd almost be anticipating them wasting like such a beautiful situation on an amazing good fortune from an organizational standpoint. We're talking about arguably two of the top three players in the Eastern Conference, like two of the top three players, you can argue it, two of the top three players in the entire conference are out for the majority of the season, if not the entire season, on two of the top four teams who would have been the top four teams in the conference if those players were healthy. And this is happening simultaneously to the Knicks having their strongest roster in decades, if not ever, with almost their entire core rotation entering their primes all at the same time. Do we understand how absurdly ideal that is? Like, we need to take a moment to consider how ideal this situation is for the New York Knicks. And of course, there are other teams thinking that too. There are a couple teams. There are the Cleveland Cavaliers, who are amazingly talented, probably going to be the best coach team in the East, if, you know, for my money. But they did lose whatever miraculous version of Ty Jerome that they got last season. And there are some guys who, in my opinion, are very, very clearly due for regression in terms of shooting and other aspects. And so I would personally take the Knicks roster over theirs. You might disagree, Geoff, but that's where I'm at. Orlando, not many people around the NBA or really anywhere are higher than the Orlando Magic than I am. And we talked about the Magic in our last episode before this one. And it seems like people saw them in the preseason and they're like, wait a second, what those guys were talking about 4 months ago, that seems to be the case. So people are catching on. But to me, Franz Wagner is easily an all NBA level player, like, at his best. I expect improvement from Paolo Banchero, and I expect a leap to come either this year or next. Obviously, I think we're two of the higher people on Desmond Bane in the world, maybe. Desmond Bane is one of my favorite players in the league. This guy is a guy across 9 college and NBA seasons, has never shot below 38% from three, and also shot 44% from three, Geoff, on 8.5 threes per 75 at 23 years old with the Memphis Grizzlies. And he can do a ton more than just shoot. This is a ridiculously skilled player that they've added into this core of two young wings who can get into the paint at will, who are ascending, and who have all NBA level potential. It's ridiculous. Like, I don't think people recognize what's happening in Orlando, even though they're starting to. But the Knicks still have a better roster. They have more prime age players than Orlando does. And I think Orlando may just be better positioned for like next year or even the year after to actually maximize their true potential. This may be a little early for them, not because of experience, but because their players are not as good as they're going to be when they actually reach their primes, like all the Knicks players are. So to me, the Knicks are my favorites to come out of the East. I think this is their best chance to win a title since they actually did in the 70s. And I do think, like, again, not just from a Knicks fan perspective, but from an NBA fan viewer perspective, to take a moment to actually let that soak in with how idealized this situation is for the Knicks. And it is on Mike Brown to make this come to fruition. And so we'll see if he's able to do it.
Yeah, I don't even really have much to add. That was just perfectly said. This is the Knicks' best chance in the preseason to meaningfully contend in most of our lifetimes. They're all in their prime. The East is relatively soft. Another team I would have mentioned that I like is Atlanta, but I know you weren't going through all your candidates. But I think Atlanta is going to be a problem this season. I like Quinn Snyder a lot. I think they have a good team around Trae Young. Interestingly, the biggest question mark to me is Trae Young, but that's for another episode. Like, can he find that all NBA level offensive impact again? Because sneakily, it's the numbers are not regressing, but it's just, I don't know if that's as big a slam dunk as most people think it is. But regardless, this is the Knicks' best chance, and it's on Mike Brown to maximize this team. And similar to how it was for Tom Thibodeau. If the trends aren't looking good, when we circle back and we're covering the Knicks again, you and I are going to be the first two to say, hey, he's not getting the job done here. So I fear there are going to be people who are very excited to jump the gun there, if that makes sense. They're going to be looking to, in the name of fairness and equality, to hold Mike Brown to the candle in a way they weren't willing to with the last coaching regime. But we're right there with, in terms of fair, objective analysis. This is a championship team, and they need to be held to that standard and that expectation. And if things, they're going the other way, first and foremost, you're going to have to look at deployment and their strategy, because they have all the other pieces there ready for them. And I don't know how much more there is to say about the more macro conversation of like the Knicks title odds and the chances they reach it. This is a championship level team, and it's just on the coaching staff and on the players to follow through.
Yeah, and you said it. I mean, like, I'm excited about what Mike Brown is saying. I'm excited about what he's done so far for the Knicks, and I think it's clearly an upgrade. Like, it's clearly an upgrade over Thibs' approach for sure. I think that I feel very comfortable saying that. At the same time, if people think that we're not going to criticize Mike Brown or whoever was the coach, if it was an analytics-based coach, if it was Mark Dagnall, if it was whoever it was, if it was Joe Mazzulla, and we're not going to criticize things that they do if they aren't maximizing this team or moving towards that concept of maximization for the team. It's not about like a personal issue with the coach or anything like that. It's just about what's happening. So we're going to call it how we see it all season. If you need to come back to this episode at some point at the end of the season and say, yeah, those guys were really high on Mike Brown. Now they're furious at him. I mean, hopefully for the Knicks, it doesn't go that way, but we're just going to be consistent and call it how we see it. So, Geoff, we should end there, but man, I'm excited to be back. This was so much fun, dude. I miss Hot Hand Theory. I don't know. This was great, man.
This was awesome. And also, I just, as you were just talking, I just looked through my notes, and we actually found a way to, in under an hour, we checked every single box. The only thing we didn't cover, which is fine, I'm just gonna throw it out there, and the listeners can take it wherever they want. Mitch starting means Yabusele is their only center. That's a note I had. Is their backup big? And you pointed me to this when he was on the Sixers. Yabusele playing power forward is a very different player than Yabusele playing center. And so whether Mitch starts or he doesn't, the Knicks need to make sure that when both Towns and Mitch are healthy, one is on the court at all times, whether Mitch starts or he doesn't, because Yabusele is not a center, and he should not be out there by himself without one of those two guys.
I love how you squeezing in the content into every minute of the show, as we do in true Hot Hand Theory fashion. We have a lot to talk about, and we're going to be talking a lot more this season. Can't wait to cover other teams. We'll be covering the Knicks. We'll be here every week, and we will be on a consistent schedule, dropping at 11 a.m. every single Tuesday, as well as other days throughout the week when we talk about various teams, commentary videos, video essays, articles, community posts, everything, merchandise. It'll be a amazing season for High End Theory, and I can't wait for it to play out. But until next time, for Geoff, I'm XJ, and this has been Hot Hand Theory.